It began with a letter, not a request, but a demand. A line drawn in the sand, delivered from the highest levels of power in Washington, D.C., to city halls and state houses across the nation. The message was simple and brutal. Bend to our will, or we will break you. This was the opening salvo in the Sanctuary City War, a fierce, high-stakes battle pitting the full force of the federal government against local leaders who dared to say no. This isn't just a story about politics or policy. It's a story about power, defiance, and a fundamental conflict over who controls our streets and defines the future of our communities. The architect of the offensive was then Attorney General Pam Bondi. Acting as the tip of the spear for the Trump administration, she launched a sweeping campaign targeting jurisdictions designated as sanctuaries. The administration's definition was broad, encompassing any city or state with policies limiting cooperation with federal immigration agents. 32 letters were sent out, landing on the desks of mayors and governors from Boston to Portland. The language was anything but diplomatic. Bondi's message was an iron-fisted ultimatum. One source familiar with the letters characterized the tone as, "You better comply or you are next." The threats were explicit and designed to inflict maximum political and financial pain. First, the money. The administration vowed to work with our other agencies to cut off their federal funding. This wasn't just about small law enforcement grants. It was a veiled threat against the billions of dollars that flow from Washington to the states, funds that support everything from infrastructure to healthcare. For a state like Illinois, which receives nearly $43 billion, over 40% of its revenue from the federal government, the implications were staggering. Then came the threat of force. The administration declared it would send in law enforcement just like we did during the LA riots and like we're doing here in Washington, D.C. It was a shocking invocation of civil unrest, a clear signal that they were prepared to federalize local police or deploy federal agents into American cities against the wishes of their elected leaders. As Bondi put it bluntly, if they are not going to keep their citizens safe, Donald Trump will keep them safe. The jurisdictions were given a deadline. They had until a specific date to reply and lay out the steps they would take to, quote, eliminate laws, policies, and practices that impede federal immigration enforcement. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a demand for unconditional surrender. As the deadline ticked down, all eyes turned to the cities in the crosshairs. In Boston, just hours before the ultimatum expired, Mayor Michelle Wu stepped up to a podium, flanked by city leaders, ready to give her answer. It was a masterclass in political defiance. Mayor Wu, stop attacking our cities to hide your administration's failures. Unlike the Trump administration, Boston follows the law that has made us the safest major city in the country. Mayor Wu didn't just reject the demand, she went on the offensive. She framed the entire conflict as a diversion, a cover-up for what she said was the Trump administration's missteps. Then she twisted the knife, turning the administration's focus on safety back on them. Mayor Wu, continuing from the same press conference, "We are picking up the pieces of your failures to deliver on your promises. Under the Trump administration, groceries are less affordable, housing is harder to build, cures for cancer are farther away." It was a bold, fiery counterpunch. But for federal law enforcement officials on the ground in Boston, her words were not just political rhetoric. They were a dangerous fiction. They painted a starkly different reality of what sanctuary policies meant for their daily work and for the safety of the city. One ICE official described an unprecedented public safety crisis, stating that sanctuary policies mean no collaboration with local jurisdictions to make arrests. They argued that individuals who have already demonstrated a willingness to break federal immigration law have already shown a predisposition to not respect the laws of the country. They pointed to a grim list of cases where individuals with active ICE detainers, requests for local authorities to hold a person for federal pickup, were allegedly released back onto Boston streets. The list included accused rapists, gang members, drug dealers, and violent assailants. To prove their point, they highlighted specific arrests made despite the city's policies. An illegal migrant from Turkey into custody after being charged with rape and indecent assault. Another from the Dominican Republic, charged with assault to rape, assault and battery with dangerous weapons. In one dramatic instance, ICE officers showed footage of the arrest of a Haitian migrant who they said had 17 criminal convictions. The message from the local ICE chief was chilling and direct. This city is not safe under a liberal mayor. But even as they detailed their frustrations, they projected an image of resolve. While Mayor Wu held press conferences, they said the men and women of ICE are out working, making her community safer. Back in Washington, the administration's top officials echoed the concerns of their agents in the field, framing the issue as a simple matter of law and order. Pam Bondi speaking in a direct televised interview with a firm and serious tone. If they don't comply, we're going to sue them. We're going to take away your federal funding. You're going to have to comply. We're going to send in law enforcement. If you're not going to do your job, we're going to do it for you. The Department of Homeland Security amplified this message, with one assistant secretary accusing sanctuary politicians of playing Russian roulette with the American public's lives. They warned that if local jurisdictions refused to cooperate, the federal government would be forced to flood the zone by hiring more than 10,000 new ICE enforcement officers. The administration weaponized tragic events to make their case. They pointed to the deaths of 3 people in Florida, killed in an accident involving a commercial driver who was an undocumented immigrant. The driver had been issued a license by California's DMV. A DHS official declared that those 3 people would still be alive today if not for California's policy, calling it a direct consequence of sanctuary jurisdictions that put American drivers and passengers in danger. The administration saw a perfect test case for its strategy right in its own backyard, Washington, D.C. Citing the city's rising crime rates, President Trump invoked his unique constitutional authority over the District of Columbia, federalizing parts of the Metro Police Department and deploying the National Guard. Pam Bondi quickly touted the results: over 550 arrests and 76 illegal firearms seized. The president claimed D.C.'s murder rate was higher than Bogota or Mexico City. Now, whether D.C.'s crime problem was truly worse than Bogota's became a matter of colorful political debate. But for the administration, the facts were secondary to the narrative. D.C. was their proof of concept, a demonstration of their will to intervene and, in their words, take our capital back.
Across the country, the responses to Bondi's ultimatum were as diverse as the nation itself, creating a complex patchwork of compliance and resistance. In Louisville, Kentucky, the Democratic mayor chose the path of least resistance, facing the threat of federal intervention and what he called a terrifying increase in raids by ICE. He quickly agreed to the Justice Department's demands for increased cooperation. With that, Louisville was officially removed from the federal government's list of sanctuary cities. It was a pragmatic choice, prioritizing stability over a protracted legal fight. In the Pacific Northwest, Oregon and Portland took a more nuanced, legalistic approach. Governor Tina Kotek and Mayor Keith Wilson sent carefully worded letters asserting that they were, in fact, complying with federal law. Their argument, supported by constitutional law scholars, hinged on the 10th Amendment's anti-commandeering doctrine. States are not required to use their resources to enforce federal law. As one expert put it, they are simply allowed not to lift a finger to help you. But then there was Washington State. Governor Bob Ferguson, a man who had already built a national reputation by successfully suing the Trump administration 55 times, delivered a response that was nothing short of a declaration of war. He called Bondi's accusations legally baseless and breathtaking. He openly mocked the letter for referencing unidentified policies and practices, and most alarmingly, for threatening state officials with prison time under federal conspiracy and harboring statutes. Washington Governor Bob Ferguson, calm but resolute, speaking at a press conference.
Washington State will not be bullied or intimidated by threats and legally baseless accusations. In the America that I love, we resolve our differences peacefully, through public discourse and, if necessary, through the courts, not by threatening political opponents with imprisonment.
Ferguson made his position crystal clear. I am prepared to defend Washington from any litigation the Trump administration wishes to pursue. He declared that his state would not bend the knee to a Trump administration that day by day drags us closer to authoritarianism. It was a powerful defense of local democratic will against what he saw as unconstitutional federal overreach. This division played out elsewhere. Colorado officials rejected the sanctuary label even as they grappled with the presence of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua. And in Illinois, Governor J.B. Pritzker directly defied the administration's ethos by signing a law allowing undocumented immigrants to receive state financial aid, a move one congresswoman called a slap in the face to hardworking Illinois families. This entire war boils down to two fundamentally different and perhaps irreconcilable visions of public safety and the rule of law. Proponents of sanctuary policies argue they are a cornerstone of effective community policing. The logic is simple. If undocumented immigrants live in constant fear of deportation, they will never report crimes they witness or crimes committed against them. This creates a shadow population, vulnerable to exploitation and allowing criminals to operate with impunity. As one Washington state representative argued, these laws ensure that when someone calls for help, help will come without fear that that help will come with handcuffs and deportation. It's about keeping local police focused on local crime, not federal immigration matters. But for ICE officers and their supporters, this logic is dangerously flawed. Sanctuary policies don't make anyone safer.
Or the community safer. The criminals who are unlawfully here, who are released by the city, are a public safety crisis. As far as the city of Boston and Mayor Wu not backing down, the men and women of ICE are not backing down either.
Critics see sanctuary cities as a direct affront to the principle that America is a nation of laws. They argue that these policies don't just fail to cooperate, they actively obstruct federal law enforcement. They point to the alleged use of communication apps by community groups to warn residents about the locations of ICE agents, asking if this constitutes obstruction of justice, especially when criminal organizations like MS-13 and Tren de Aragua can exploit those same networks. This conflict over local policy is further entangled with broader national debates, like the move toward no cash bail, which President Donald Trump decried as a disaster responsible for rising crime. In the eyes of the administration and its supporters, it's all part of the same permissive ideology that prioritizes criminals over law-abiding citizens. Ultimately, the dispute centers on a critical legal question. By refusing to honor ICE detainers, are states merely not lifting a finger to help? Or are they illegally obstructing a federal duty? It's a clash that pits the federal mandate to secure the border against a city's right to police its own community as it sees fit. The sanctuary city war is not over. The lawsuits are ongoing, the federal funding threats remain, and the deep ideological chasm that separates Washington, D.C. from cities like Boston and Seattle has only grown wider. This is more than a policy debate. It is a stress test for American federalism itself. It forces us to ask fundamental questions. Where does federal authority end and local autonomy begin? Who is ultimately responsible for public safety on our streets? And in a nation built by immigrants, how do we balance the enforcement of laws with the protection of all people within our communities? The answers will define the balance of power in this country for decades to come. Whether the federal government's hardline approach will succeed in forcing compliance, or whether it will galvanize an even stronger resistance from states and cities defending their democratic rights, remains one of the great unresolved questions of our time.